I wasn't able to kind of make decisions and stand by them. I had a really deep sense of sort of imposter syndrome. My confidence sort of plummeted. I was kind of questioning myself, things that I was doing.
Because the moment I was like, no, I'm not going on payroll, I need to invoice. They were like, oh, and let's add, I had my child at 16. So I was more like, no, I can't do that. They're like, child, why is everything wrong with you? You're holding a baby and holding an invoice.
And I spent the money on the offices, and we were getting it all kitted out, and we had a launch and everything, and literally within 4 weeks the turnover plummeted. And I kept thinking next month it'll be better, and started ploughing in money to keep the business going, to keep the staff on.
I didn't really have that much money. I had my savings, but I don't come from a family of privilege. I come from a working class family. So I had all of these kind of barriers that at the time I didn't realise were barriers. I just got on with it and just moved. I moved without thinking. I had an idea.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of She's the Boss Female Entrepreneur Stories, where I'm joined by phenomenal women from the world of business and entrepreneurship. If you haven't already done so, make sure you click that subscribe or follow button so that you're the first to know when I release a new interview. And if you're not already following on social media, go and follow. Instagram at She's the Boss UK, Twitter at She's the Boss INTL. I'm also on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect, Daniela Genus, and on Facebook, Daniela Genus, She's the Boss. Today, I am joined by serial entrepreneur Lillian Ogbogoh. Lillian, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So this is our second attempt at this interview. The first time I had some major chaos in my house, which resulted in a fire in the wall. So we had to reschedule. So I'm really looking forward to actually getting through the interview today with no emergencies taking place. So
likewise.
I look forward to hearing more about. So tell us, serial entrepreneur, tell us more about what that means, the journey to becoming Lillian, the serial entrepreneur.
So I think the serial entrepreneur is the easiest way to describe it, because I'm a coach, I'm a corporate trainer, I'm also an NLP practitioner, I'm also a certified hypnotherapist, and I've worked in project management. So I've done different things and started as a project manager, having a day job and doing what I need to do. But before then, I'd already had a business while at uni and, well, till end of university, and trying to figure out, I'd come out of university with a friend. We decided, yes, we'll go on and start an event company, had that for a while, and things happen and you transition. And I discovered coaching because I had someone work with me, because while I was running that event company, one of the things that we were doing was organizing events for women. And the idea that I would have these events and have to go into the front of the room and introduce our guests, our speakers, used to fill me with so much dread. It was terrifying. I was like, oh God, I can't do this. I cannot do this. And I used to get up to the front of the room, do it, like literally imagine that I'm sweating buckets and this is uncomfortable. And we had someone who spoke at our event, and she was an NLP coach, and she was talking about overcoming fears and using NLP. And I'm like, I need to discover this. So this worked with her and discovered the root of my own issues with public speaking. Decided now I was going to join Toastmasters. I was going to get comfortable speaking in public. Then between that, while going through the coaching and using Toastmasters, I then started a podcast accidentally. And this is way back in 2008. Started that podcast, and simply it was accidental, never intended to start a podcast. Wanted to use it to continue getting over the fear of speaking in public, because didn't like the sound of my voice, and I wanted to get comfortable listening back. So I wanted to just interview friends. Somebody found the interview, and then I get an email saying, hey, we have a client. He's just brought out a brand new book. He would love for you to interview him. And I'm like, okay. If they don't know that I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not going to be the one to tell them that I don't know what I'm doing. So I said, okay, let me put something in their way. Let me put a blocker and say, hey, I can't do the show if I don't get a copy of the book. And they, in my mind, I'm like, they're going to say, no, we won't give you a copy of the book. You need to go away. So I was prepared. I was like, see, universe, it wasn't meant to be. Ha ha. They come back going, sure, where do we send the book? I'm like, ooh. So I was like, yeah, if you send it here, and I was like, okay, so they sent, and me thinking they would not really send this book. The book showed up at my house. I'm like, oh, so I'm going to have to do this show. So I interviewed this man, and I get the most incredible feedback. And when I ended that particular show, I had interviewed one person from almost every inhabited continent of the world. And it was really amazing. But in between that, I'd become a certified NLP practitioner. I'd started learning how to coach, and started public speaking and sharing my own story. And things progressed. I then fell into teaching. I was teaching part-time for a college in London. And just because they were looking for somebody who has NLP qualifications, that was what they were asking for. Chance conversation with a friend. Got into teaching, and where we are now in 2020, I've been a part-time teacher or tutor or visiting tutor for a college for adults for the last 10 years. And I've done that off and on for the last 10 years part-time. And that's helped grow my confidence as a speaker, getting out on stages. I've spoken internationally, and I've always been fascinated with certain things. So hypnotherapy being one of them, recently certified as a hypnotherapist to work with various clients. But all my work, everything when you stitch everything I do, has always been around working with women. Mm-hmm. How can I support a woman to grow, be better, find herself, love herself, show up in her business, step out into the world stronger, happier, whole? And whether it was doing events, very, very early doors that were just about women events and for women to network, to have business events, to come together, or whether it's doing what I do now, where I'm using hypnotherapy to help break habits that are getting in the way, whether it's my ebook that I currently have out, but all my work has really been about women.
What and funnily enough, we have quite a few similarities and journeys, because I started out an events company just after finishing uni, because I was doing events whilst at university. Right. I also was a visiting lecturer for about 7 years. So there's some similarities there. Yeah. So, and also I had a crippling fear of public speaking. I didn't go down the NLP route. I got thrown into it. But tell me more about where that fear came from and how. So that's question number one. But also, when you did that speaking engagement that everybody has who does speaking, where you get off the stage and that was amazing. How did that feel, and what was that moment for you?
So the genesis of my fear of public speaking, I think, started in school. Mm-hmm. So growing up, children are cruel, make fun, being told to, being made fun of and feeling a certain kind of way, being out and just feeling very nervous and very self-conscious, and a lot of other things. But it stems from a feeling like my voice should not be heard. And there was a lot of people are looking at me, people are judging me, what are people going to think I'm saying? And so I think all of those things, and they're different roots about it, but it really comes down to feeling like my voice should not be heard, or my voice is not worthy of being heard. And so there was a point, even though amongst my friends I'm fine, but standing up in public is like, okay, I will rather eat broken glass covered in battery acid than speak in public.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what point did you get to, I just did a great job?
Oh, okay. So I think the point I got to that I realized I did a great job. Now I'm thinking, I think the first time was I had to do my first speech, where my first solo, I had to get up, and I wasn't a guest anymore in Toastmasters. And I had to do a guest speech at another Toastmaster community. And I went in and I did this speech about I can't remember. I'm trying to remember what it was on, but it was along the lines about owning our voice as women. And I think I remember the opening line where I said, it's important for us to own our voice as women. Because imagine that the world, and I'm trying to remember this because it's a good many years ago now. Imagine that the world allegedly was thrown upside down by a woman who could not or did not speak. Imagine how the world will be if collectively we spoke as women. And I remember going on and delivering this talk. And when I finished, I think everyone in the room was looking at me, and I was like, and they're like, oh my God, that's really amazing. I remember I got a certificate for it and everything. I was like, okay, I didn't die. The world didn't end. I can do this.
No, that's beautiful. That was powerful, by the way. I'm like, I want to hear the whole thing. That's such a good point. I've never heard it phrased like that before. So that I'm already impressed. And I think this is such an important conversation to have, because there's so many women that are afraid to use their voices, that are very intimidated by the concept of public speaking. And because they run from it, they're missing out on opportunities. So you sharing this story, I think, is really powerful to show that you can overcome it, and you're not going to die if you get up on a stage and speak.
You're not. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's uncomfortable. It's and then people say, but when I see you speak, you look so, relaxed and everything. I go, yeah, because I've had experience. But don't let what you see fool you, because there's still days where there's certain stages where I have to step into. I have to pull up my big girl panties very high before I step out on those stages. Mm-hmm. But I've learned how to deal with it. I've learned how to hone the fears. I've learned how to say, okay, this is what I need to do. How do I prepare? How do I show up? And I've learned how to get out my own way. So, and I always say this, if I can do it, anybody can.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So I'm going to ask you a question that I already asked off air, but I think it's important, particularly because we're talking about speaking. You have a very interesting accent. I'm sure people are listening or watching and wondering, where is this accent from? Can you share that with us?
Sure. It's a byproduct of globalization. That's what I normally tell people. They look at me like, sorry, what? Why? I'm like, yeah. So I'm British born. I have Nigerian heritage. So born here, raised here for a bit. And then my parents took us to Nigeria. And then so you then are slammed up against the Nigerian accent and the community, but also had a lot of friends and family who are American, aunts, American by marriage, and then also spending time stateside. But the thing was very close-knit circles, and so didn't really assimilate into, it's hard to say this, when you live in certain environments, there's almost bubbles that you end up living in. And so certain bubbles, certain accents, certain privileges. And moving back here, when I moved back here, I didn't go to secondary school. Mm-hmm. And so didn't assimilate. So I was of age where I was already fully formed. Yeah. And so I remember I had to go to college. And I remember the first time I had somebody come up to me and say stuff to me, and I was like, okay, yeah, no, I don't, why are you doing this? And I remember the person was like, something, rah, and I'm like, could you tell me why you're roaring at me? Because I really don't understand, why are you roaring at me? What's wrong? And somebody had to go, no, she's not roaring, she's exclaiming. I'm like, that pretty much sounded like she was roaring at me. So
I love it, but I also think having access to people and experiences that are outside just one space can be so enriching to our lives. So I know for me, for example, I'm married. My husband is Nigerian. I'm Jamaican descent. We have lots of friends from the continent and from the Caribbean. We're based in Birmingham, but we have a big community of friends and family in London. Mm-hmm. And I just think it really opens your eyes to understanding and looking at things in a different way to how everybody else does. And I wanted to ask that because whenever I hear interviews and I can't work out where the accent's from, I get really annoyed that the interviewer doesn't make any mention of it.
So yeah, it's an amalgamation. And so even though I sound like this when I'm with elders who are back home, obviously your accent will have to change so that you can speak and be understood, and they can they can feel like you understand them, and vice versa. So it is I also call it the chameleon in all of us, that where we have to adapt and adopt and present ourselves where we find ourselves.
So you've mentioned obviously that you went back to Nigeria for a period of time. Can you share with us the impact of your kind of Nigerian culture and experience on the route and on your life, really?
Well, I think having my parents take us back home, and I'm going to have to say this, and I always preface this, the Nigeria my parents took us home to, I feel does not exist anymore, because it was a more communal kind of community. It felt like there was a community. Mm-hmm. And so it's funny, I tell the story of why I don't smoke. And one of the reasons why I don't smoke was because I wasn't afraid of my parents catching me smoking. I was afraid of my neighbors catching me smoking. And then they will then march me home. And then my parents and them will have a whooping party, because that's that kind of community that you grow up in. And so there's a sense of strength in character, because even though I'm very fortunate in the sense that my parents put us into a certain environment. At the same time, they made us understand our privilege, mm-hmm. that what we had was a privilege, not a right. And so we learned the respect of others. And that's one of the things that is very important to me, is no matter what a person is doing, that person deserves your respect. Whether the person is the driver, the person at the gate, or the person that works in your home, the person is a person and demands your respect, first and foremost. And so I was raised in that way. And so even though we had people helping my parents employed as staff in the house, my parents made us understand they were not working for us. They were their staff. And so we had chores to do and had to learn how to do those chores. We also learned that the world is vast. And so when you have had to understand how to survive, you learn skills living in Nigeria. I've learned how to repair things. There are things that I've learned that actually stands me very well in this country. So one of the things I learned very early on when I was a teenager was how to change a tire.
I can't do that at all. I wouldn't know it.
So, and I remember when I'd moved back here, I was in my early 20s, and myself and my cousin, we were going for a walk, and it was summer, and we passed a couple of aunties who were dressed for the Nigerian parties. They had the gele on, they had everything, and they were standing around, and I looked at them. They're like, "Oh, we've been waiting for an hour for AA and we're late." And I said, "Auntie, do you have a jack in your car?" She goes, "Yes." I go, "Do you have a spare tire?" She goes, "Yes." I go, "Okay." And I remember I was wearing this long dress that had a button that buttoned all the way down in the front. So I hiked the dress up and kind of rolled it up and tied it around my knees, got out her spare tire, got out her jack, and I took off her, jacked up the car, took off the tire. People were watching, the aunties were watching, even my cousin. And I was like, it's a tire. I'm not performing brain surgery here. And I put the tire on, fastened it, put the flat tire in the car, put the jack in, closed the car, and I go, "You don't need an AA, Auntie." And she looked at me like I had grown to it. So, but for me, that was known because you don't have AA in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. So there's no AA coming to rescue you, and you don't know who is going to come and help you out if that person is friend or foe. So you're going to need to learn how to do things yourself. So there are things that you learn a level of self-sufficiency. At least that's what my parents instilled in us. And so learned a level of self-sufficiency that I still survive by today. So yes, I can change a tire. Do I want to? That's a different case now. Now I'm like, RAC, where are you? Come change the tire.
I love that. And it's so interesting because I think a lot of the time people that are raised here have a very specific viewpoint on, not even a viewpoint, have this sense of privilege. That's the word. Like, I am British and I was raised here, and everybody else is kind of other, and your experiences are going to be in this specific way. And actually, I think by being raised in a Western society, you are also at a disadvantage because you don't learn how to be as self-sufficient, because everything is pretty much provided for you.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I love this story.
Yeah, I think that there's an advantage and a disadvantage to everything. So could I probably survive on a deserted island for a while? Yeah, because I've learned some skills. I probably could. Did I miss out on certain things not growing up here entirely? Yes, I missed out on having the opportunity to go to dance schools, and I wanted to do ballet. And at the time when I was growing up, these things were not available to us in the country. Now you have people who have opened dance schools, and little girls are having ballet lessons and all the dance lessons they want and need. And there's a part of me that's like, finally, yes. And I look at my parents and go, yeah, I'm going to sue you for the fact that I didn't have any dance lessons.
Well, here's the thing. The things were available to us here, but were they accessible? And as a Black woman and was a Black child of living in the UK, I was never going to a ballet class because I knew it wasn't for people like me, number one. And also I had big hips, so they weren't going to take me. So pros and cons and everything. So you've got this passion for supporting women and helping women find their voices. Obviously you're a woman, but is there anything particularly on your journey that really sparked that kind of passion?
I think for me, I don't know. I can't say this is the one thing that sparked that passion. I do know that everything I've done, no matter how unrelated, there's always been a slant towards women. Mm-hmm. And I think I always say that I start with what I know. Mm-hmm. Since I'm a woman, I'm going to start there. Mm-hmm. And so I think I used to put on events that I wanted to go to. Mm-hmm. And especially you pointed out very much the fact that as a Black woman in the UK at the time, I'm talking about early 2000s and the late 90s, where you go to certain events and you feel like you're the only Black girl in the village, or you're at certain things and going, and so I wanted to have an event where I didn't feel like the other. Yeah. I want to be part of something that I didn't feel like the other. Now, where did that start with that driving for getting women in touch with their entrepreneurial spirit and doing all the other work? I will have to just tell you, it's something I was born with. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. What has been in your opinion, the kind of greatest impact that you've had on a woman that you've worked with? Like, is there a journey that you've been on and you can say at the end, like, I've been instrumental in changing the trajectory of this person's life?
Well, I think I could say there's been many impacts. I've worked with women in Curacao, and it's something as it was an anecdotal story I told them in Curacao in 2015. In 2020, I got told by one of the women who was at the event I was at, she still remembers what I said, even though it sounds silly. It reminded me of the power of it and the power of how we use our voices. And I spoke about how Batman and Superman has his cape, Batman has his utility belt. And these things, whether we believe it or not, give them the confidence to go into the world to do what they do. And for me, I was talking about how when I would prepare for interviews and had to go into stressful situations, I would wear particular underwear because I needed something to give me that, my equivalent of the Batman's cape. And starting to work with women to say how we show up, how we present ourselves, what we are doing. And till to this day, these women in Curacao remember it. And they remember that when they are in difficult situations, they have to show up. That's one. Two, I think I've worked with women who have been afraid of speaking in public, have gone on to become public speakers. I've worked with women who have wanted to start podcasts, We've worked together. They've gone on and started their podcast, and one of them now has an award-winning podcast. I've worked with different women in different ways, and so I think the most pivotal one was my particular client I was working with. This was in a couple of years ago now, and she wanted to move to Australia. It's been on her list for the last 10 years. It's been on her vision board. Nothing seems to be working. We worked together. Then I got an email from her and go, I know you haven't heard from me in over a year, but I just wanted to tell you I'm now living in Australia. I have my dream job. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. I am loving my life. And I think as a coach, you can't really complain about that.
Mm-hmm. How do you, so for me, I've kind of started to get used to it, but when people come back and tell me those stories, I always am kind of amazed at the impact that I've had on somebody's life. Do you have a similar kind of feeling?
It's almost, I would say it's almost like you have that proud mommy feeling, and then you have this appreciation and gratitude. Not, I think gratitude there's a gratitude to it. No, it's a humbling feeling because you feel privileged to have made an impact.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's a humbling feeling where you're humbled to be part of their journey. You're honored, I think, and also honored to be part of their journey. You're honored that you had the privilege and you had the privilege to be the tool for them to use to get to where they need to go. And our messages as coaches, trainers, speakers, whatever we do, we don't own those messages. Nothing is our own. It's just we get to tell that message in a way that speaks to them. And so the fact that I had the privilege and honor to actually work with them and help them shape their story, to me it's a powerful feeling.
Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful feeling.
Yeah.
For me, this week, I've had quite a few clients reach out, and it has, as you said, it's been really humbling to think that I've played this role. And I always wonder, do other people really feel in the same way that I do? Because for a moment, it kind of knocks me off track. Like, oh, wow, this has happened, and I have had an impact on this. But I don't think people often talk about it and how it makes them feel. And speaking about impact, your trading name or your name, the name of the business at Company's House, I know there's a really important story behind that and somebody that's had an impact on your life. Can you share that with us?
So my trading name is Broken Plate. I call it Broken Plate Productions. And the reason why it's called Broken Plate is in honor of my maternal great grandmother. And she was a trader. She was a businesswoman in her time. And she was an exceptional woman from the stories I've heard about her. And she lived life in her own terms. She was at a time when women were meant to be at home and all of that. She's like, yeah, your business. I'm doing what I need to do. And she did. She lived her life. She made those rules. And this is somebody who wasn't formally educated. And so she didn't speak English perfectly. She spoke broken English and she spoke Igbo. And when she would deal with the traders, the foreign traders, and buying the big China dishes, because that's what she dealt in and that's what she sold, she will call them broken plate. And this is a story I heard about her growing up. And she used to say broken plate. And I remember we had this huge bone china dishes in our home, and my mom will tell me it's the story of her grandmother, and her grandmother gave it to her and all of that. And unfortunately, I remember something happened and I broke a few, so sorry, great grandmother. But my business is named Broken Plate in honoring of her daughter, who was my grandmother. And even in honor of my mother, because my mother as well is a businesswoman. My grandmother was a businesswoman. And so coming from that line, I wanted to look back and say, I have to honor these women. for who they were and their contribution, because without them, I wouldn't be. And even my grandmother, who when I met her was this little old lady, didn't know her story. And then I found out her story, that she'd been a seamstress, and she basically was a trader in her own right, used to go to different villages and buy food and come in and sell at wholesale, and sell to markets but sell to individual. And she was a philanthropist as well, making sure that the people in her community who couldn't afford food had food. And so for me, that was a story that needed to be told. And if I can tell it through the fact that my business is named after my great-grandmother, then that's what I decided to do.
I love to hear stories about family and lineage. So my business initially, although I've changed the name since, was Genus Enterprise Consultants. My surname, my business surname is Genus, and I've kept the name for business because my grandfather I was very, very close with, and his name was Genus. So I have a married name, and I use that for like doctors and stuff like that. But for business, it was really important for me to make sure that I maintained and honoured my granddad, because he had such an impact on everything that, even to this day. And some of the biggest lessons I learned was from him. So I love to hear the same kind of things from other people. And I suppose that goes on to my next question then. What would you say, in terms of lessons, are there some of the greatest lessons that you've learned over your career? And they could be those that have been passed down by your mother or your grandmother, given that they also were in business.
I think the greatest lessons I've learned from books, from experience, from life, from other women in business is tenacity. Mm-hmm. We're going to fall down. We're going to get dirty. We're going to fail. And we need to have that ability, to find that ability to get back up one more time, one more time, one more time. Nobody ever promised us success. Nobody ever said, yeah, just go down that road. That's where success lies. Nobody promised us any of those things. But the journey that we're on, we chose it. So you got to get up one more time. And sometimes, you know what, it's okay when you get hit hard enough to say, you know what, I'm just going to take a moment and sit on the sidelines for a while. But after a while, dust yourself off and get back up. And I think that lesson of tenacity, that lesson of resilience, being able to bounce back, has been one of the greatest lessons for me.
I love that. Part of my mantra is keep pushing, because again, I think it's so important as women in business, as women in the world. There are so many obstacles that we have to face. There's so many different situations where we may get thrown off course or thrown off track, and the trick is to keep pushing irrespective and regardless. And that's really where the true win is. It's that phrase, it's not important how many times you get thrown down, it's how many times you get back up. And I really resonate with that. And actually, going back, my granddad always used to say, it's okay to be down, but you choose how long you stay down for, and don't let it be too long. And I think that's one of the lessons that I definitely learned, and I think kind of sits with what you've said. Again, nice segue into the first of the final two questions. 3 pieces of advice that you would give to a woman who's sitting at home now, who has just started her own business. What advice would you give her?
Okay, so 3 pieces of advice. I think the first advice is actually going to be the last advice I said. Hone your resilience skills. You're going to need it. Another piece of advice is don't be afraid to fail. Because the one thing is we see the Insta culture, the Insta success, everybody's online and everything looks great, everything, oh God, the lighting is good, all of those things. We don't see what led up to that. So my backdrop looks really nice and it's nice and serene, but I have to take down that backdrop when I'm done. So you don't know what's going on behind the backdrop. And so don't be afraid to get dirty and fail, because that's the only way you're going to learn. And if you are worried about not being a success first time around, just remember this: you did not start walking just like that out of your mother's womb. Everything has stages. My third piece of advice is do not listen to those voices in your head that want to sell you up the river. I call them the chimp committee, the inner critic. People call them so many different things. But those voices that keep wanting to remind you how not enough you are, how this and that, and how, oh my God, look, you did that speech and everybody looked really bored. They want to remind you of your worst moments always. But your job is going to be not to listen to them. You have to listen to the other voice, that very voice that sometimes is a little quieter, that says, come on, Danielle, you can do this. It's okay. You're going to be fine. No, you won't die. It's all right to try. What if you did it and it worked? That voice, that very quiet voice. And I think if I have to give one more thing, is have a life circle. So we are taught we should mastermind and all of that. We should have a network, but there's something about having a life circle, as in a circle of people who you can fall back into. So when you're having moments where things feel like it's falling down and falling apart, that you have this circle of people who are on similar journeys, and they could be friends, they could be your partner, they could be sometimes family if you have family on that same journey in terms of owning a business, but it has to be people that understand what it is to be on that journey. So you want to have these people, and they're like your catcher's mitt. These are people that will catch you when you fall. But then also they serve another purpose, because these are the same people that will champion you when you're on the rise, when you're on the move. They'll be the ones. They're your perpetual hype team, and they're going to give you the support, the hand holding, the gentle kicking when you need it. These are people you need in your corner always.
Such powerful advice. Thank you so much for sharing. That really resonated. Just awesome, really.
Okay.
Do the boss recommend book, podcast, or any other resource that has had an impact on you that you would like to share with our audience?
Okay, so I would do two. I would do podcast and a book. I would recommend my podcast, not because of me. I'm great and all, but not because of me. Actually, because of my guests. I have been fortunate and honored. My recent podcast I have, and it's been going for 4 years, is the singular job of this podcast is to shine the light on amazing men and women within the Black community. So it's the BME community, but recently we are really focused on the Black community. And men and women, whether in the UK or further afield, who are doing exceptional things. I have been honored to tell their story. And so for me, you get to hear me, but you get to find out about these incredible people. If you drive through the Blackwall Tunnel in London, the reason why you can still drive through the tunnel and be on your phone is because of a Black woman.
Oh, wow.
Yes. There's, at the time I interviewed her, she was the first and only in her field in 2018. She is an interior design for children. So there's so many amazing people that I've interviewed. I think that it's a great show to go and discover, and you never know who you might discover. The show is called Shine Out Loud Show. And then as far as books, I will start with Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. This book did something to me in a way that I almost cannot explain. And when she explained the idea of how you could have an idea and all of a sudden it feels like the whole world and their friend has the same idea, and you're thinking, did somebody steal my idea? Did somebody come into my house, take the idea out of my head? What's going on? Talking about a theory about we do not own the ideas, that what happens is we are merely the vessel in which the idea is meant to come through the world. And the idea is both, it's created and creator in its own self. It's that it exists, and it will hang around and wait only for so long. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to try somebody over there and see if they're ready for me. And so this idea that you are nothing, no idea can be stolen from you. 1. 2, that if you miss that particular idea, another one will come.
Mm-hmm.
And that 3, there's enough ideas floating around for you to have your share in life. So that was a book that really, I would definitely recommend. I would also recommend the book, The 7 Habits That Rob Us of Our Power as Women. And I wrote that. And essentially, this is a book that looks at the 7 habits that actually gets in the way of us showing up as powerful women in the world and what you can do to fix them.
Awesome. Adding those both to my list, and I will be purchasing today. And I encourage everybody to do the same. Thank you, Lillian. It's been such a joy speaking to you and finding out more about your story and your journey. If people want to find out more, what platforms can they find you on?
Oh, I make it really easy. I'm almost everywhere. So you can find me on LinkedIn under my name. You can find me on Twitter under my name. You can find me on Instagram under my name. I'm on Facebook, but don't really use it that much. So definitely Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And also you can find me under my show, which is the Shine Out Loud show. You can find me under the same places. So Twitter and Instagram as well.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. And as usual, if there's anything that Lillian has said that's resonated with you, please drop a comment so that we know that it's had an impact on you. And make sure that you click that like button. Please make sure that you share it with anyone in your network who you feel may benefit from hearing Lillian's story. And make sure you tune in next week, Sunday at 8, for another She's the Boss female entrepreneur story. And also, make sure that you subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you click that subscribe button. Thank you. Have a great week, and I'll catch you next week.
Bye.
Thanks again, Lillian.
You're welcome.